Hi, everybody. It's fantastic to be here, really. Especially being here in Europe in an environment I'm struck by the incredibly rich history of philosophy in this part of the world. And even though I'm not American, I have to say that America gets kind of a bad rap for its history of philosophy. It's not the first place that we think of when we think of great philosophers. But I would posit that America has some extraordinary philosophers. And one of the most important ones, I think, is Yoda. Now, yes, nerd clap. Yoda said many, many interesting things, I think, across a number of different contexts. But probably the most important thing that he ever said to me was when training Luke Skywalker on how to use the Force, and Luke offered to try, Yoda said, "Try? Do or do not. There is no try." Which has become such a significant thing that it actually appears on embroidered pillows on Etsy, which, by the way, is how you know that something you said is important. But most people misunderstand what Yoda meant. They hear try, do or do not, there is no try, and they think that means don't fail. But in fact, what Yoda had to say was significantly more important and cuts to the heart of what it means to be a person. Let's think about the word try. What does try mean? Try like what a drug dealer asks you to do, right? Take an effort at something and see if it happens to hook you. Or try like this year of financial crisis is really exhausting, which is another meaning of the word try. But humans are doing machines. We do. That's our nature. We do. Whether it's in athletics or in all of our beautiful artistic and kinesthetic glory, we do. And it turns out that there's a core biological reason why we do. And it's an amazing little neurotransmitter called dopamine. Anytime you challenge yourself to something in the world, anything at all, and you achieve that thing, your brain secretes a little bit of this beautiful chemical called dopamine. Challenge, achievement, pleasure, right? And isn't that interesting? If we're the only animals that actually experience this challenge, achievement, dopamine release, doesn't it help explain why so much of the world is so beautiful and amazing, and why humans have done so many great things, and also why so much stuff is so messed up? Another thing that's kind of messed up is how we educate kids. Pretty messed up stuff. And it's not enough that we overload children to the point where they end up coming home from school broken and exhausted, or that we set up an education system that is fundamentally opposed to the biology of teenagers by asking them to wake up in the morning when we now know all the science says they should be sleeping in the morning and working at night. We still do it. But this isn't our greatest crime. Our greatest crime is that we ask this resource to sit down in one place for 8 hours a day and stare straight ahead and listen to people drone on and on and on, and maybe read some stuff and write some stuff. Sit down and pay attention, won't you? But isn't that fundamentally opposed to our nature as doers? Look, we wouldn't ask somebody or expect somebody to learn how to play the drums by reading about it on a piece of paper. So why do we take language, which is our greatest evolutionary advantage, and mathematics, which is inarguably the most important thing we've ever invented, and treat them like they're something that doesn't really matter, and that doesn't matter nearly as much as it should? There is a solution, though, and there's an answer, and there's some models that we want to look at. And the solution may be a concept called gamification, and I'm going to show you some examples of that today. The core concept is to use the best ideas from games, loyalty programs, and behavioral economics to engage people in a new way. Use these ideas in a new way to create engagement and rethink how it is that we educate. And it turns out that the science is increasingly backing us up. It's not only the difference in games between the real world when it comes to that challenge, achievement, and dopamine loop. Like if you think about regular life, how often do you get that shot of dopamine? Like once a month or once a year? Or how many marathons can you run? Once a lifetime? And in games, we get that hundreds of times per hour. But it's not only that. The science increasingly tells us how games can affect education positively. Recent research at Stanford University with Hope Lab showed that games affected players' motivation in a way that literally reading and lectures could not. And the Kauffman Foundation found just a couple of years ago that games increased educational outcomes by over 100% as compared to the best possible lecture at 17% increase in educational outcomes. So the science is starting to back us up. But even as the science catches up, there are these amazing, amazing examples of games being used to transform education, and I want to share some of my favorite ones with you today, kind of inspire you and get you thinking about different ways that this can work. Now, let me introduce you to a guy named Tim Vandenberg. Mr. Vandenberg is the #2 seeded competitive Monopoly player in the United States. Everything is a competition in the United States, and Monopoly is one of those things. But Mr. Vandenberg is also a teacher at the Hesperia School District in California's Inland Empire. And the school district is quite poor. The students there are just as likely to come from a family that's in prison as a family that's involved with gangs or drugs. It is a very difficult and poor environment. And in that climate, Mr. Vandenberg has unleashed a revolution based on Monopoly. His school offers a special enrichment program that he runs where the top math students from around the school get to spend the last month of the school year playing Monopoly with Mr. Vandenberg. Now, it's not any old game of Monopoly. He's modified the board so that there's lots of learning to be done. He teaches them about probability. He teaches them about collaboration. He teaches them about economics. He teaches them about negotiation. And in the process, over the course of the last 4 years, his little school that had no hope of doing it has gotten 40 students in the top rankings in California math test from less than 10 at the start of the program. It now has a substantial number of students who score perfect scores in the California math test, up from 0. And, which should hearten everyone in this room, half of all of his high-achieving students are girls. And Monopoly is making a big change. Monopoly's such a cheap thing, it's $12. Monopoly's making a big change. Let me introduce you to another educator that you'll want to know. This is Ananth Pai. He was a business executive who didn't like the way his kids were being taught in school, and so he went back and got a master's in education and took over a class in White Bear Lake, a suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota in the United States. He was given a failing class of third grade students. And he said, okay, I'll take your failing class if you let me redo the curriculum. And the school said, okay, they're failing anyway, do what you want. So he went out and with his own money, he bought a bunch of computers and Nintendo DSs and replaced the reading and math curriculum at White Bear Lake Elementary School with games, off-the-shelf games, games you can get for your children right now. In 18 weeks, Mr. Pai's class went from failing the third grade in reading and math to being at mid-4th grade level in reading and math. In 18 weeks, he's repeated the experiment. It happens every time. The most interesting thing about it, both for Mr. Vandenberg and for Mr. Pai, and I had the pleasure of seeing Mr. Pai's class, is that it's not that games have replaced the teacher. Au contraire, what they do is an amazing job at teaching. They actually teach like old-fashioned teachers teach. They know what their students need. They give them direction. They come up with lesson plans. But the books and videos and lectures have been replaced by games, which is an interesting little correlate. But it's not only examples from educators going against the grain. This is a startup called Codecademy. The founders have a triple bottom line objective, which is to teach everybody how to write software code because they believe it's a critical skill for literacy in the 21st century. But it turns out that not enough people learn how to write software. In the space of a year, the highly game-centric Codecademy taught 1 million people how to write software in 1 year, which is an amazing achievement, even more amazing when you put it in context. That's more than all the STEM graduates in the United States put together in the space of 1 year. And it's the power of their symmetric game. Both the teachers and the students at Codecademy benefit when everybody moves forward. That is the core power of what they've been able to accomplish. Or, looked at from a university standpoint and looking at pure science, this is an app called Fold It. It was built by the University of Washington because it turns out scientists, in order to do all kinds of advanced drug discovery, need to be able to come up with the structures of critical proteins and DNA. But computers are actually really bad at figuring that out, whereas humans are really good at doing this process called folding. Humans are naturally good at it. So the researchers at UW were looking for a way to activate humans to do this work, which is incredibly important for this piece of science. So they built this thing called Fold It. And last year, Fold It, the game, created a major breakthrough. Scientists have been working for 15 years to discover a critical structure in the protein in the fight against HIV and AIDS. And last year, 49,000 people playing Fold It in 10 days discovered the structure of that protein that had stumped mainstream science for 15 years. Even more interestingly than that, which is already amazing, okay? But better, 50% of the people who played Fold It were not in the science or math fields at all. Half of the people who contributed, and this is, by the way, a real hard thing to do. Half of the people who contributed to it were not in this field at all, so learning about science in this context. Now, there's another kind of bigger picture thing about education that's not solely about math and science and reading and language, but also about changing the way that we think. And this was really hit home for me from watching a TV show called The Aviators, which is a Canadian-American documentary series about aviation. And the voice, I'm watching one day, and the voice comes on, and he's like, what would happen if we put a 12-year-old kid in charge of a plane? Could he land it? And I was like, well, that's an interesting question. So I watched this show. They take this kid, Remy. You see him up on the screen, 12-year-old boy. They take him off the street. They put him in a flight simulator, the same kind of flight simulator that the pilots who fly you around train on, with no training. And in 90 seconds, Remy had landed a 737 at LAX in broad daylight. And I sat there, my jaw hit the ground. People, listen, I grew up in an aviation household. I grew up around this stuff. I fly all the time. I am not the guy you want to call on if the pilots get sick. Like, hey, can you help us land the plane? Like, I'm not that guy. So I'm like, how is it possible that a 12-year-old kid could do this with no training? And they turned to the guy who runs the simulator, and they said, how is this possible? And he says, oh, yeah, we get some private clients in here sometimes. And he's like, the kids, they play video games all the time. They have no trouble with this. It's their parents that have the problem. And I thought, how interesting. How interesting. The kind of behavior that Remy was exhibiting, the skill that he was exhibiting, is a thing called fluid intelligence, represented as GF. Fluid intelligence is our ability to problem solve in situations where we've never experienced it before, where we have nothing to go on. Our raw problem-solving skills. This is the thing that's implicated in innovation, in solving all the difficult challenges that lay before us in the world. It's different from crystallized intelligence, which is our ability to use the things that we already know, like 6 times 6 is 36. Fluid intelligence is critically important. It turns out that you can actually raise your fluid intelligence using games. This is a game called Dual NBAC, or NBAC, a type of game, which has been shown to raise people's fluid intelligence. In 4 weeks of play, you can raise your intelligence score by 4 or 5 points, and that halo effect will last for 8 months or more by playing this game. Fluid intelligence is not at all something that you cannot train for. And isn't that incredibly optimistic? Isn't that an amazing idea? That we can raise people's fluid intelligence using games? Think of all the problems we could solve. But I've been focusing on kids, and education isn't just about kids. I mean, many of you right now in the room have jobs, and like many children, you're asked to sit all day and watch or listen to somebody drone on, right? Stare at a computer screen all day. But education doesn't stop when you stop being a child, and it's just as important for adults. And even there, gamification is having a tremendous effect. This is Plantville by Siemens. It's a game designed to help people learn how to run factories. It has been played by 20,000 people around the world who go to the site, go to Siemens to find out how to run a plant. And all the heuristic reports are, this is awesome. I mean, this sounds like a way better way to learn how to run a plant than reading through the manual, right, over and over again, or watching videos about the collapse of nuclear reactors. Another example, this time from IBM, this is their platform called Innovate, and the offshoot game called City One. Innovate was an internal business process management game. Now, business process engineering doesn't sound like fun, but set that aside for 1 second. It's an important thing that lots of people have to know how to do. So IBM built an internal game out of this, and then decided, hey, let's put this up on the web and see what would happen if people used it. Today, over 1,000 institutions, universities around the world, use IBM's Innovate game to teach people how to do BPM. Hundreds of thousands of people have learned how to re-engineer business processes using this game and its variants. It's also, just to give a little bit of business rationale to this discussion, it's the #1 lead generation tool for IBM in the world. It's people who play this game. Their best foot forward. Or, for those of you who work in large companies and have to get annual reviews, one of the core ideas behind the annual review is it's not supposed to be just a waste of everybody's time. It's supposed to be something that actually helps you learn and do a better job. So instead of it just being your manager showing up once a year like a troll from the mountain with a piece of paper going, here's what you got, approved by the union, approved by the HR, whatever, the whole concept is being redefined by companies like Duprops and Ripple. And the concept is you have this smartphone in your pocket, and it means that you can give instantaneous feedback to anybody, superiors, subordinates, and peers, about a job well done in real time. And you just pull your phone out and go, thanks so much for your help, boom. Nice work on that pitch. Yeah. Great job, boom. It's so American, right? Okay. But listen. Listen to how awesome this is. Major successful startup companies, including Europe's current Web 2 media champion Spotify, have standardized on this approach for the annual report. Annual reports are dead. They're over. Now it's all about instantaneous feedback powered by game mechanics like virtual rewards and points to tell people what you think about how they're doing in real time and closing that feedback loop. In all the different examples and patterns that I showed you today, there are 3 core concepts, and they emerge and reemerge and bubble up over and over and over again. And they explain to a great extent what's so powerful about the gamified model and transforming education. They're feedback, friends, and fun. Feedback, friends, and fun. This is what people love. This feedback, friends, and fun, the 3 Fs, create engagement with people. They generate engagement. They drive attention. They make people engage with a problem or a process like education. And every single experience, every facet of education for children or adults can use more feedback, friends, and fun to make it compelling and powerful. So in the examples that you've seen across the scope of this, you've seen the 3 Fs used. You've seen educational institutions, individuals, and startups focus on helping to educate children and adults, moving this discussion forward, using the power of games to create unprecedented engagement and amazing results. And I think in every single case, we can, as a group, agree that we can make education more fun. We can make education more engaging. And in doing so, perhaps we can drive the solution to major problems in the world that can only be achieved by raising people's fluid intelligence, by making them aware of different problems that come along, and by making language and mathematics, our 2 most important evolutionary and discovery skills, the top of mind, the most interesting courses to take, not the most boring classes to take, but the best classes to take, the thing we always want to work on, the thing we want to learn on until the day we die. There's no reason why that can't be the case. And I think through the power of gamification, I think we're starting to see something that Yoda would be proud of. We're using the force to drive people's drive and love of learning forward, and that force is the 3 Fs of gamification. Thank you very much.